Hi, welcome to MamaFuel. My name is Anne Ferguson. I am your host, and I'm thrilled to bring you this podcast that was created to fuel every mama's heart, soul, mind, and body, and hopefully spark a dream or two along the way. My mission is to change the way that we mamas treat ourselves and each other so that we feel better, live happier lives, and change the world one happier family at a time. In the MamaFuel podcast, I'm sharing real, raw, and often funny conversations with amazing mamas from around the world to remind you that you're not alone and that you're doing amazingly on this wild journey of being a gorgeous woman shepherding small humans as they make their way on our beautiful planet. You are amazing, and I cannot wait to share this conversation with you. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to this week's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. I am really looking forward to you listening to this conversation, and I hope that it is a conversation that you listen to with your whole entire heart. Barb Klein is my guest, and she is an author, a mama, an advocate, a possibilitator, a retreat host, and a vital support to mothers whose children are living with addiction and struggling with mental health problems. In this week's episode, Barb generously explains her family's journey with mental health and addiction. And this is really a conversation that should be required listening or encouraged listening. I don't like to require anything of anyone, but encourage listening to anyone who is around children or young people or any human for that matter. Because you may not be facing into addiction or mental health problems, but the odds are that someone very close to you probably is. And those people need a whole heck of a lot of support that, for the most part, they're not getting right now. Enjoy this episode. And also, before I forget, Barb mentioned something really important during our conversation, which is that in the last 5 years of her family's journey, she has been able to find her way back to herself through beautiful self-care. And I wanted to remind you, if you haven't heard already, that I am hosting MamaFuel's urban retreats for moms. I will be hosting them across Switzerland in October, November, and December of 2019, at time of recording, in Geneva every month from September to December, and then traveling to Basel, Bern, Zurich, Zug, and other places besides. I'm also looking forward to taking the MamaFuel urban retreats for moms to the UK soon. So if you would like to know more information, check out the website mamafuel.me. Click on events, and you will be able to find the mini retreats there. I hope to see you at one of them very soon, and really encourage you to take as much loving care of yourself as you can, no matter what's up in your life right now. Without any further ado, here is this delicious, vulnerable, and beautiful conversation with my friend, Barb Klein. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. My name is Anne Ferguson. I am your host, and I am deliciously delighted to share with you a conversation today with a woman who I met a year ago in a beautiful place that was so filled with open hearts and kindness. And in the midst of that morass of human gentleness and beauty was this source of strength and serenity and acceptance, who I was lucky enough to share a cabin with at Camp Good Life Project in 2018, and has since become a friend. And I love having conversations with today's guest, Barb Klein, on a personal level. And I also know that as a result of the conversation that we are going to have today, even before it happens, there will be some incredible insights for you and for the people that you love. Barb is an author, a coach, a retreat leader, a mama, a survivor, and a possibilitator, which might just be my favorite new title for anyone ever. Barb, thank you so much for being my guest this week on MamaFuel. Welcome.
Thank you. It is my absolute pleasure to be with you today and with all of our listeners.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited to share. every week a conversation, but this week is particularly delicious. So let's start with my always question, which is tell us a little bit about what your life looks like right now so that we have context for where this conversation sits.
Sure. Life right now, I am living in the beautiful Finger Lakes of Western New York. 2 years ago, my husband and I became empty nesters. And so we took the sign from my younger son that he was getting a 12-month lease to mean he was not planning to come back.
Excellent.
So we downsized massively and we moved to the lake. And I'm looking at it right out the window there. I mean, this is a lifelong dream of mine to live on the lake. And I'm here with my soulmate, my husband, who I've been married to for 31 years now, been with for 34 years. We have 2 boys who are, yes, grown young men, but they will always be my boys. They're 20 and 26 right now, and each out there finding their own way in their own way.
Yeah.
And I have my own business. I work from home. He works from home. So, able to create a life that works for us in so many ways.
That's the dream, isn't it? A life that works for you in whatever way that looks like. I want to put a pin in that. A life that works for you. And let's come back to that. See, first exchange, boom, a pin already. Okay, so let's go back 27 years or earlier maybe, and talk about your entry into motherhood. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you for asking, because I love this memory. Because my mom was quite a bit older than I was when she had me. She was 44 when I was born. And so when Tom and I had been married for 4 years, and at that point where we were ready to consider kids and had been trying for a while. And the minute that the early pregnancy test stick turned whatever stripe it was, I ran right over to my mom's house, and she said I looked like the cat that just swallowed the canary. I was so happy and I was so excited. And she couldn't believe. She's like, how can you know so soon? Like, I don't believe that's possible, because in her day that wasn't possible.
Of course.
But yeah, so it just, everything I had ever wanted. Married to the man I loved, having our first baby. And, that was the dream at that time. It was wonderful.
So you had your first son, and then 6 years later, he was graced with a little brother. Yeah,
5.5 years later. And yes, 2 very different children. And my older one was one that, I had no idea, right? I was a new mama. So anything that went wrong, I thought was about me. So I read all the books, I did all the things. We tried all the, let him cry it out, let him come to bed with you, and just made ourselves a little bit crazy. I had a 5-section notebook with him, thinking I would need it when I had another child. So, the eating, sleeping, all the things. And then my second one came along, and totally different from the very beginning. Just, with my first son, anything he did became a pattern. So if we got him up in the middle of the night, I needed to be able to be prepared to do that for the next 2 weeks, like literally. So you had to really think about it. Do I want to do this? Do I want to, The younger one was like, he cried. He just needed to be put down. He wanted to go to bed. It was just a world of difference. And the funny thing was, we thought my older son was so easy, and we were a little bit afraid, like, well, what if we don't have enough love for the second one? What if he doesn't sleep as well? What if it's not as easy? And then we realized that a kid could sleep without needing the shower running in the other room, without needing our finger in his mouth, without needing us to sit there for hours and comfort him. So it was really good for me to have both of them, to understand that they come into the world with their own personalities, and so much of it has nothing to do with us as parents. Some of it for sure, but...
Can we just take a minute to let that land? Every person who is listening, who feels responsible for all the things. Like, I was talking today to a friend who is a mama, and with challenges just like every mama and every child come across occasionally in this journey of life. As you write in your book, having a life that's gray and boring and bland isn't much of a life. And she was reflecting on something that's going on in her professional life right now and saying, I know I just need to do this, and I know it's me. And on the heels of a conversation I had on Sunday at time of recording with my husband, where I was feeling a bit that way, he was like, it's not possible that everything that happens with our kids is connected to you. Like, it's not possible that we as parents are responsible wholly, or even in part, for stuff that goes down. Like, kids come in with their own, as you say, personalities, which for sure anybody who has ever encountered a child will know that every child has their own personality. But even at birth, they just have different needs and then like their own path and their own dharma. And I mean, whoa. And we somehow, I don't know what it is. How does it bake into us that we have this false sense of almost, I don't like using the word God, but almost superhuman influence and importance in the lives of our children simply because we're their parents?
I think we're conditioned to believe, what is a mother? A mother is responsible. A mother is to take care of her child. A mother is to keep her child safe. Our children are a reflection of us. And I know we'll get more into all of this, but that's been a huge part of all of this, is really honoring each soul's journey. My journey, my husband's journey, each one of my boys' journeys, and all the people in our worlds that we encounter.
I love that. And I hear that when things are going well.
Mm-hmm.
And today I'm really keen to dig into how to honor each soul's journey, our own and everyone else's, when things aren't going well.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
So let's dive right in, because part of the context that you haven't mentioned is something you talk about really beautifully in your book, which, if you're not watching this on YouTube, is called 111 Invitations, Step into the Full Richness of Life. And it's by Barb Klein, and I will put a link to this in the show notes. It is a beautiful book of poetry, of reflection. Yeah, it just, again, it feels, when I read your words, I feel that same feeling that I had in the middle of camp, which could be at times completely wild and frenzied. And being with you was like, I was reflecting before we started talking, it was like, when you go into the woods and you find one of those big, old, noble, strong trees that has just weathered so much, and you feel that energy, like you put your back up against the tree and you can feel like, okay. That was like, I didn't realize it in the moment, but that was the energy that I would feel from you in the midst of this, like, of
Wow.
The camp amazingness, craziness, glitter, all the costumes and the, hugs and squealing.
Mm-hmm.
It was really beautiful. And so in your book, you talk about the fact, as I mentioned before, that you have like the blandness or the highs and lows, and you wouldn't trade the highs and lows for just gray.
Yeah.
And I underlined some parts, and I know you've done the same thing, but you say, the very circumstances that have been so heartbreaking and challenging are also the ones that have awakened and opened my heart.
Mm-hmm.
These were the times that strengthened my relationships with myself, my family, my friends, and community. I learned lessons and access to deeper compassion, love, and purpose that would not have been possible had my life gone in different directions. As I wanted it to, I would add.
Of course.
That's the edit for me.
Of course.
This journey has awakened my soul and called it forth to its true expression. So let's talk about that. you have your beautiful boys, you have the love of your life, you're living this great experience, and then life's like, curveball. And then more curveballs. And you say earlier in the book about how on the one hand you have this, on the one side, this beautiful expansion and growth and delight and self-discovery. And on the other side, you have like explosions, landmines going off every time you think about taking a step. And how do you exist between those two places? So can you talk to us a little bit about the context we haven't alluded to?
Yeah, absolutely.
We haven't named, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, and those are the two sections I was going towards, so thank you. Those are perfect. And I do think it's important because I think what I have learned, and this whole journey has been such a learning for me and such an experience, and things I would never have learned otherwise.
For sure.
And that piece about the gray, it's like, I really do believe if life hadn't shaken me out of complacency, I could have easily, smooth sailing, just stayed in the job, stayed in, everything was hunky-dory. And Tara Brach talks about cultivating a heart that can hold it all. And I think that's what I've had to do. Because my mind cannot make sense of being in these two contrasting places at the same time, where my world is falling apart and yet I'm growing a business and I'm writing a book and people are stepping up. And that's been my reality. So, I was talking to Tom about it today, and I just said, we both wanted to make sure that the message comes across that we are so much more than our pain and that we love our life. And he uses this pie analogy that 7/8 of the pie is great.
Tom is your husband.
Tom is my husband.
Yeah.
And there's 1/8, that kind of sucks a lot of the time and it can seep like peppers on a pizza into the other pieces. But 7/8 of it is great. And so I don't want to lose that. And I don't want to downplay anything. And I also want to be really clear that this has been a 10-year journey. So I didn't get here overnight.
So let's go back.
The prelude to, let's go back.
Let's go back to 10 years ago. So life is humming along, hunky-dory, 2 boys, jobs, life, yada, yada.
Yeah. I mean, certainly not without challenges. And my older son had dealt with ADHD, and we had been advocating for him his entire life. So that piece is important as well, I think. But yeah, it's October, I believe it was October 9th, 2009. A night like many others. Kids were doing their homework, and yet I noticed my older son was getting way too distracted by his phone. So finally went in and took the phone and just said, you need to buckle down, do what you need to do. Usually at this point he was 16, and usually at that point if he had to hand over his phone, he would have locked it. And for whatever reason, he didn't that night. And so I went up to my bedroom and I started scrolling to see what was going on. And, honestly, what I found out in that moment isn't too unusual, I think, for parents of teens. And I don't know, I don't know if my soul knew at some level that this was going to rock my world, or I just overreacted. But at any rate, I learned that night that my butt could shake, which I did not know before. What I found was a text between him and some kid that he was going to meet down the street at midnight, and a picture of weed. And really had believed him up until that point where he had said he wouldn't ever smoke weed because he knew he had an addictive personality, and if he started, it would be bad. So it just shook everything. I'm shaking now just remembering it. Mm-hmm. And like I say, in a way, as I shared with parents at that point, yeah, they all do it. They all smoke weed. And I think that's still kind of a common belief. And what I would say to that is I think it's like alcohol, that some people can and be okay. Some people dabble in it. And like alcohol, some people become addicted to it. And so in that moment, I didn't really know how bad it was. I just knew I was terrified that he was considering meeting this 19-year-old kid down the road at midnight. That's pretty, already out of control and beyond anything I knew that was going on. And it was within 7 months or so, I think, that we learned, we did an assessment and learned how serious the addiction was. I felt in that moment, like there was a sinkhole in front of me that kind of was just swallowing up my whole life as I had known it, and had all the thoughts of, am I going to be able to keep on working? Is my marriage going to last? My marriage had already survived all these years of disability and things that many marriages don't. I won't say most, but, is my kid going to be okay? I can go to Peru. I can take him to Peru. I can get him clean. So, I mean, the first thing that kicked in for me was absolutely the fierce mama bear, and I will fix this, and I will muscle my way through this, and there's nothing we can't solve, and we'll get the counselors, and we'll do all the things. So that was the beginning.
And then the 10-year journey was not, as you're still on this journey, clearly it didn't end there. It wasn't sufficient for one external person, even though your mama, to sort of gallop up and say, I'll fix this, because the person who was involved in this was outside of you.
Yep.
It was your son. And so you started on a long journey of, as you're saying, honoring another person's path and honoring another person's choices, even when...
I don't think I was honoring at that point. Let's be clear.
Not honoring.
Fighting, totally resisting.
Totally resisting, trying to control and protect and save, because...
Absolutely.
Holy shit.
Absolutely.
And yes. I imagine also in moments like that of crisis, self-care, you don't even know how to spell it anymore.
I didn't even know what it was.
Right. So don't know what self-care is, hoping your relationship lasts because you're sure as hell not paying any attention to that either, other than to share terror and like that you're both feeling. And then things kind of went from there, not in the direction that you would have hoped.
Yeah. And I think the other piece of, I'm like the isolation set in because this isn't something you talk to people about. Now, I did talk to my work people about it because I thought, okay, this is going on for me. If I'm not available to you as your boss, let me know. That's not okay, and I think they thought I was ridiculous for doing that, but I felt it was important. Mm-hmm. But up till this point, we had always gone in with the school on, hey, this is going on with our kid, and what can we do together? And of course, they were noticing things happening at school, and they were noticing and they were questioning, and they were not wanting to find drugs in his locker because then they would have to call the police. So we're kind of having these alluded to conversations without really being able to go there and not knowing who can we turn to that can help us with this. So I found really no support for this. There were no books. I mean, the books I found were about kids who had died, kids who were doing heroin, kids who were in jail. And this was just marijuana at this point. So nothing. There is no What to Expect When You Find Your Kid Is Addicted book out there.
It's not on the shelf next to What to Expect When You're Expecting.
No.
Yeah.
Like it was hanging in the toddler years. It's really not cool because this is so much more and so much less predictable and so illogical. So we were really navigating in the unknown and doing everything that we could and tearing our hair out at the same time. So I almost don't remember those years between 16 and 18 or before I got on this journey of self-care, which really was only in the last 5 years. So, okay, there's 5 years of what was I doing? I was floundering around doing the best I could. I remember, and what addiction, my husband said this really well. When you're in relationship with somebody who is struggling with addiction, which is a mental illness, there are 3 of you in the relationship. Mm-hmm. And the addiction is the most powerful one.
Absolutely.
So the behaviors that come out of that are horrific. The abuse, the stealing, the lying, all the things that happen would not happen if that illness was not there. And
right.
I have to keep that in mind. And that's part of what I really want to bring that point home, because this is not a choice that any of us made. This is not a choice that he made. The other piece that was going on at that time, and I knew about it when he was a senior in high school, his nurse let me know that he was binging and purging, that he had bulimia. And, it's like addiction, eating disorder. Yeah, there's this other thing he does. And so we put that aside and really focused on the addiction because that felt like the crisis. And we did. We just lived from crisis to crisis to crisis. And at 18, I mean, so I will say I had to do all of the things. I had to do everything that I possibly could. So counseling, inpatient, outpatient, all of those, before I could really get to a point of setting some harder boundaries. So we had done all those things. And then he was back with us. And at 18, it was clear that he couldn't live with us anymore. So to tell your child, no, you can't live with us, knowing that he had nowhere to go, knowing that that meant he would be primarily homeless, couch hopping, park bench sleeping, still being in contact. The love has always been there. I mean, that's the amazing part even to me. But the love and the mother, what's a good mother, all of that I had to redefine because sometimes it meant to be a good mother to say, no, you cannot come back here. No, you can't have $1. No, you can't have a sandwich. And I'm imagining any mother would know how hard that is. Or father. We both went through this.
Yeah, and so many layers.
Mm-hmm.
I understand from friends who are children of alcoholics or people who have been in relationship with someone who lives with a mental illness, specifically addiction, that there is a component at some point of needing to save yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, then the addiction takes everybody down.
Absolutely.
And I wonder if you could talk a little bit to us about that from your perspective as a mom, or even you and Tom's your and Tom's perspective as parents.
Mm-hmm.
Because chances are somebody is listening who either has a child who is demonstrating addictive behaviors or is fearful of being in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, 10 years into this journey, which continues with various types of care, various types of incarceration, various types of oversight, etc.
Mm-hmm.
What would you have said to yourself if you could go back to yourself 10 years ago, 5 years ago? I mean, now I see you and I feel this sense of rootedness and of steadiness. Mm-hmm. But I know from conversations we have had that is not your daily jam all day, every day, because that's not human. Yet it seems that you are able to access in the midst of all the completely unpredictable and utterly terrifying circumstances your son finds himself in, and therefore your heart finds herself in. Mm-hmm. You manage still to find, to work with your coaching clients, to host retreats for mamas who have children who are living with mental illness and addiction. Mm-hmm. You somehow have grounded yourself so much that you're able to hold space for other people. So if you were to hold space for Barb 10 years ago or 5 years ago, what would that look like?
I love that you're asking that question, because I've been asking other mothers that lately. Like, what would your words of wisdom be to your younger self? And
I have goosebumps.
Yeah. And what I hear and what I would echo is buckle in. It's not an easy ride, and it's not a short ride. And once you've lived it, a lot of them, I support moms at all different stages of this. Some of those kids are doing fine. Some have died. Some are in it. I I feel like once you've been in that red zone, like your nervous system is still a little extra keyed up. So save yourself. I loving, living, and letting go is kind of my theme. And it is possible. It is possible to still love your child and not be in there. So first of all, I would say let go of any idea that there's a right or wrong way to do this. A lot of what I hear out there comes across to me in a shaming way, in a judgmental way. You know, even the people that are trying to help by labeling. You know, we try to put labels on everything. And
so that we feel safe. That's for us. That's not for the people who are allegedly we're trying to help.
Yes. And the best label that my son was ever given in all of the years of diagnoses and, you know, trying to figure out all the things was a complex child who defies categorization. And that was when he was 8. And it was like, well, thank you very much. That doesn't get me any services, but holy shit, is that correct? And so he's a complex young man who defies categorization. And I just wish we could look at the whole world with that eyes, you know, like, what do they need? What do you need? And set those boundaries. I mean, I guess this has been the guiding force of what can I do in this moment? What can't I do? Brene Brown has a great video about boundaries, and that's what it is. It's what's okay with me right now. Let go of the stories of what you think this should look like. Let go of that idea that a mother is supposed to save her child because maybe you can't. Find a way to live. After I came home from camp last year, I did one of the workshops I took talked about beautiful questions. And those are the questions that your mind alone can't answer and you might have to sit with for a long time. But one of my beautiful questions, and I think it's been one of the most freeing ones, is, and I shared it with my husband, is what if we stopped trying to save his life and loved him as he is for as long as he's here? Because we don't know. We don't know. We don't know how long they're supposed to live. We know that we think we're supposed to outlive them, but we don't know. I've heard of parents whose kids have died, and it's like what they did in that lifetime and what they did while they were homeless on the streets, maybe that was their life purpose, you know? So and not everybody goes down the same journey. They're all different. So don't presume that yours is going to be the worst ever, but take it moment by moment and be with yourself where you are. I think this is one of the things that really sustains me is meeting myself where I am, not being at war with reality. That's a big one. I don't have to like it, but this is what's here. So now what? And, you know, in the 12-step programs, they talk about one day at a time. And I've dropped that down to one moment at a time because 24 hours has a lot of moments and it can change dramatically from 1 hour to the next. So I think, you know, letting myself be sad when I'm sad, letting myself be angry when I'm angry and not thinking, ooh, I have to go be all zen and meditate my way out of this. It's no. Sometimes I need to get in the car, I need to turn the music up loud, and I need to scream. Yeah. I need to let out that primal energy because it's too much to hold. Keep showing up for life because I have led retreats. I led one retreat literally the day after I got 0 sleep. And I really thought about canceling it because we had had a major incident the night before. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And I had laid awake shaking all night long. And I just, I called my friend that I was leading the retreat with, and I said, I don't know if I can do this. Do I even have anything to give these women? And she said, just come. We'll take my car. If you need to go home, you can take my car and go back home. And so I went, and I mumbled, I flubbed my words the first night. I didn't really tell people too much about what was going on. But that night, we did this beautiful yoga nidra meditation before bed, and we just sunk into the peacefulness. And I was like, oh, that's why I'm here. And I texted my husband, and I said, I'm sending you love and the peace of retreat. And I went off script the whole next morning, and I had to tell all the women, I'm like, I'm here because it's better that I be here cultivating this energy of peace and joy and love and compassion, and I can send that back home than me being one more person at home spinning in the chaos. That would not have done anybody any good. So giving yourself permission to take care of yourself, giving yourself permission to find peace, giving yourself permission to have joy, and not thinking that it's wrong, because there is always that story, and I still have it at times, you know, is it really okay? Is it okay that I love my life, that my son is in jail? Is it okay that I'm happy and I'm going on this trip while my son is in the hospital? Is it okay that I'm living life? And it is. It has to be, because my soul has a life to live too, and I have things to do, and I'm not going to wait. That's the other thing I'd say, don't wait. I see a lot of moms wait. You know, they wait until their child is in a good place. They wait until their child has died, and then they're going to get on with their life. I've been afraid of him dying for 10 years. It hasn't happened yet. And maybe it will happen at some point, obviously, but it may not be. You know, I've wasted a lot of time worrying and about something that hasn't happened. So I'm learning to send blessings instead of worry. Tasha Silver has a great section about that in her Outrageous Openness book. She talks about, especially with these people that you are so bonded to, and my son and I are so connected. He will probably call me during this interview. I would just say there will be a missed call from him. If you're that energetically connected to another being and you are worried about them all the time because you care about them, it's like you're sending them this black envelope full of muck and skulls and all this ickiness. And so instead of that, just send loving kindness, send prayers, send blessings, send love.
Oh, that lands, because I spend a lot of time worrying about my beautiful girls on different levels and for different reasons. And one in particular whose path is not so simple as the others. And yeah, that I'll dig up that passage of Tasha Silver, because I have that book, of course. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think I just took it off my nightstand.
Yeah.
One of the many. But as you were talking, a few things popped up for me. One, don't wait. I mean, God, we need reminding of that all the time, and it also puts me in mind of, sending worry instead of sending love. I constantly refer to this quote, and I should just look it up and remember who actually said it. But it's, my life has been, was it Mark Twain? My life has been filled with horrible things, only a small fraction of which actually happened.
Yeah.
I'm butchering it, but it is that, to equating love with worry, or worry with love, rather, so that because I love you, I'm worried. Because I love you, I am entwined in the guts of what's going on with you. And the reality is, if we have a child who is, by all external measures, societally dictated measures, successful and happy, you don't get yourself busy and entwined in that child's entrails when they're shooting for the top, because they don't take you with them. Why? Because it's their life. Mm-hmm. So how... but I should be helping. There's helping, and then there's enabling. Mm-hmm. And then there's helping. I've said this before in the podcast, that saying yes to them is saying no to you. And so where do you need to say no to somebody else to say yes to you? So that you can breathe air, so that you can sleep a whole night without your bum shaking. Mm-hmm. So that you can, that's valuable information, by the way. The bum shaking thing. Very valuable. It is very valuable.
Pay attention if that happens.
Right. And I can also, we had an accident when I was 13, a car accident. We were slammed into by a drunk driver on the edge of a cliff. And I can confirm that the expression scared shitless exists for a reason. On the bum shaking. Little scatological information for you there. But also what I was thinking as you were talking about this advice that you would give yourself, which is so beautiful. And that I hope if you're listening and you are worried or afraid of something like this happening in your life, or you have been in a relationship with someone who has that third person, the mental illness in your relationship is, I've just lost my train of thought. But that's okay, because human. I yawned and I was trying to suppress it and I've lost my train of thought. But what I wanted to say is something that my parenting coach reminds me of all the time, which is that we set our whole lives up to not have to feel discomfort because we cannot tolerate discomfort and powerlessness.
Oof.
Right? And so we are taught as young children to seek the powerful and to seek the power within us. And think of like how many posters and memes have we seen that talk about you are powerful, you're this, you're that. Yes, and also for most of things in life, we have absolutely zero control. And we exhaust ourselves trying to control things. And I'm trying to take a step back, not at all in the same circumstance as you, but with Carolina, with her learning differences, with her shattered confidence. She's entering the adolescent years. And yeah, I'm worried. And it's frightening. And I also know that anytime I manage to say, I know you've got this. I know you've got this. I'm sharing the confidence, the trust that she can have this. We're not talking about the same circumstance at all, but simultaneously feeling like having moments where I thought I was actually going mad. And I think what is happening is that all of the frames of reference, all of the tether points that we cling to without realizing it, when those disappear, when all bets are off, when everything comes unstuck, that you've set up to keep you feeling safe and moving forward and balanced and recognized by other people as being successful and happy and yada, yada. When all of that goes away, it can feel, in the tiny moments that has happened to me, I genuinely felt like I was actually losing my mind. And we will do anything to avoid that. So times a bajillion, when you realize that your child has an addiction and then it progresses to more and more heavily consequenced choices and harmful decisions, both for your child, but also for anyone around. Like to love is, as you write in your book, the more you love, the more it can hurt.
Yeah, and addiction is like a hurricane, I would say. Our favorite disability advocate, educator, Rick Lavoie, used to talk about disability being like a waterbed. And the family's on the waterbed, and if disability comes in, it shakes everybody. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. And that's unsettling. And I would say addiction sweeps in like a hurricane, and it shakes the foundation, and it tears the roof off, and it touches anything that gets close to it, so you want to stay in the eye where you can find your center. Brandy Carlisle has a beautiful song about that I often use on my retreats called The Eye, which says you can dance in the hurricane, but only if you're standing in the eye. So you find a way to get yourself, and I have found a way to get myself really solid in myself. And the more solid I can be in myself, the less likely I am to get shaken off course. And 2 weeks ago, I was curled up in my bed in fetal position, not wanting to get out. I don't want to pretend like that doesn't still happen. It can still swoop in like this cloak of darkness where it's like, how can I serve anybody? I can't even help my kid. I can't even get myself out of bed, So it can come in, but I don't stay as long anymore. And I think part of that is because I let myself be there. I don't try to do the spiritual bypass of jumping over to feeling good because I don't feel good in that moment. Like, let's be really honest about this. Right now, this sucks. This is scary. This saps all my energy in the world to go into court and see my kid come in a jumpsuit and handcuffs. Pretty hard to go back and create after that. So I don't. And I give myself that grace and that space to be there then. And then knowing that the next day will bring a new beginning. breath, body, be in my body where I am right now. Begin again is one of my favorite self-care practices. And in this moment, and then there's times where it's like, okay, in this moment, here's what's going on for me. Here's where I am. Here's who I'm with. And it really grounds me into this moment, not where the mind will take me into the past or the future, but like right now, right here. I'm with my husband. We're at a concert under the stars. Yes, my child is in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, but he's getting the help he needs. And we're 2 hours away. So we're going to enjoy this evening. We'll be home tomorrow and see what we can do. But
yeah, because
those are the moments.
You're not a surgeon and you're not a mental health practitioner, and you're a mom and an advocate and a defender and a supporter and a human who has survival needs. Yeah. I feel like every time you speak, we could go 17 directions.
We could.
And it's funny because I was doing the in this moment practice with my daughter today because she just started school 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago on Thursday. Coming Thursday at time of recording. And she was in the car and I picked her up from football practice. And she goes, this time next year, I'm going to not, like, we're going to get to school and be like, oh my God, you guys, this is the end of primary school. She's like, primary school just went by so fast. And I said, hang on a second. In this moment, where are we? I know, Mom, but I'm just saying that where are we? Okay, I'm in 7th grade and next year I'll be in year 8. They're different years for you. So it's like grades 5 and 6. She's like, I know I'm in, grade 5 and then that'll be grade 6 will be the end. But like, I'm just saying, and like at the performance at the end of the year, when everybody reads out like their little essay, because every child who's graduating, it's a small school, every child who's graduating reads out like, these are the teachers I'll remember. This is what I loved about the school. These are my friends that I'll miss, yada, yada. We're all just going to cry. That's for sure. Oh my God, we're going to be crying. And I was like, hello, where are you in this moment? Where are you? I knew I'm in this grade. I said, no. In like smaller, in this moment, where are you? Where are you right now? Okay, I'm in the car. So where are we going? What are you wearing? And the conversation shifts, right? Because in this moment. And also, on the heels of an incredible week that I spent this summer of 2019 with my teacher, Tiffany Cruikshank, and a couple of incredible women, Dr. Valerie Kopnick and Diane Malaspina, both PhDs in psychology in one case, and I think in genomics in the other. And we were talking about mental health and addiction. And we were talking about anxiety and depression, which are the most common forms of mental illness that we see, that many people certainly dip into. I would say probably most people dip into, but some live with chronically. And it was fascinating to learn how the brain, you talk about neurological grooves or mental grooves or patterns that form, and to see how actually physically and chemically the brain rewires itself around the things that are familiar, and the parts that don't get used, the synapses don't connect. They actually, they move on. They move on if we're having one kind of behavior that's repeating itself, like the worrying behavior, let's say, right? Once a worrier, always a worrier. Well, that's not true. It doesn't have to be true. And what is true is that if you want to shift from being a worrier to being accepting and to being able to remain in the now and send love instead of drop into worry, which is my default. I'll fully admit my default is worry.
Me too.
That it requires a thoughtful and conscious and repetitive choice until the brain learns, oh, I need to feed this. Oh, I need to wire this bit. I actually need this synapse to connect with this other one over here. And so that the neurotransmitters can travel from one place to another so that you create this new pattern and groove. And that is as much the case for anybody. And not knowing enough about addiction, I imagine that we talked a bit about addiction, and we talked about how the brain rewires itself and sets its new zero so that it's like what used to get you high or what used to get you drunk or what used to get you forgetting or numb isn't enough anymore. And so that becomes the new zero, and you can work on, and it becomes more and more severe and deeper and deeper. But yeah, we externally don't have the power to change someone else's choices. And we don't have the power to rewire someone else's brain, because my God, if we did, politically, we wouldn't be where we are today. Crime wouldn't exist. I mean, the earth would be thriving and lush. We just, if we could affect change in that, to that degree in another, we would. Mm-hmm. So why do we as mothers, as parents, put that pressure on ourselves and add that not only am I in this hurricane being chucked around all the time, never knowing when I'm going to be slammed into a house, or a house is going to fall on me, or I'll be thrown in the ocean or under a surge. And on top of that, I'm not even doing that right. I'm not even, right? Like, right. I'm not supporting my kid right. And I'm not supporting my other kid, because maybe you had another son. So you're in the hurricane, you're not standing in the middle of it, you're getting checked around, your husband's getting checked around, your older son's getting checked around, your younger son is getting checked around, like the house is falling down. How do you show up for him? How do you show up for your other child?
Well, not as well as I would have liked. You know, that's one of my biggest sadnesses, I think, is what he had to go through. Because there were times he would just be hiding out in the basement while he listened to the three of us yelling and screaming and going through whatever. But I did, and we did. And I think one thing we did that I am glad for is that we didn't try to hide it from him. We didn't do the secrets, because he would have felt it anyway. So we've, maybe not every gory detail, but we've brought him along the journey. And we've let him know what's going on with his brother and what's going on. And once my older son was out of the house, it made it easier for Adam to come into his own. There was room for him. He could start to breathe. He could start to shine. But I did his senior year form for his guidance counselor for college, and it was like, oh my gosh, I have another son. And he's 17 years old. And I'm kind of just remembering that. And it's not as horrible as it sounds, but, it felt that way in the moment. Like, I just don't think he got all of us. But he is now, and he is so amazing. And he said that he gives me these Mother's Day cards that I will keep forever and I carry with me, because it's like, you have done everything, Mom. You have done this for him and for me, and we see it, we get it. And, if I say, you understand why your brother can't live with us, right? And he's like, oh my gosh, I see so many reasons, So I think bringing him along, letting him be part of the conversation, and also letting him have his feelings, letting him be pissed off and distant and angry and set his own boundaries and find his own dance. Because I think it's a dance. It's all a dance of sometimes you step in, sometimes you step away, sometimes you step out. It's you don't know, moment to moment. This is what feels right now. One of our counselors said something about, you do what you can to give them their best chance. And that was actually for my younger son. But, that's all we can do. And give ourselves the best chance. So really, there is that gauge of how filled up am I? Am I at the top of my game? Am I not at the top of my game? What am I capable of in this moment? And it's different. Did I answer that?
Yes. Yes. And our kids know stuff, right? They know things when they're teeny tiny. I remember knowing that my parents' marriage was not healthy from like age 4. I have memory. It's probably my earliest memory. No arguments ever. No, there was nothing, there was nothing you could point to. I just felt. And 13 years later, it fell apart. And that's a long time to not be naming and to not be honoring that someone is feeling something. I didn't name it either, but I knew. And yeah, all you can do is give them their best chance. Isn't that true? Even more broadly, isn't that true for you? But the reality is that often when we are using so much energy to worry, that energy could be used to send love and encouragement, not just to the child who we see struggling, not just to the ones who we don't perceive to be struggling, who may be struggling, but also to ourselves, and to just offer that gentleness and kindness. My husband today sent me a link to an article in a Spanish newspaper, and it was about an interview that Warren Buffett had given. And he'd spoken in this interview, it's late and it's a big yawn. He'd spoken in this interview with a reporter about a conversation he'd had with his pilot, a private plane pilot. And they were talking about prioritizing and how he had made his billions, not his millions. And he had said that he had this 3-step process where he would prioritize and only choose 5 things. And he was saying that so many of us have so many projects, so many dreams, so many objectives, so many goals that we set ourselves up to fail constantly. And then we feel awful about our quote unquote failure. And then it just keeps us in the failure lane because we keep setting ourselves up to never meet the 672.5 goals. And so his process was to write down 25 goals. 25 goals, which is a lot, right? Write down 25 goals. And then from those 25, you had to choose only 5. And it could be 25 things I want to accomplish this week. It could be 25 goals in my life. It could be 25 priorities I set for myself. And then you have to whittle it down to 5. Step 3, I guess, is the other 20 things. What you would normally do is you'd be like, yeah, I have those 5. And then when I get done with those, then I get to go back to the list. And Warren Buffett said, you don't go back to the list ever. Oh. Those 5 things that you chose, you become so committed to those 5 things, to seeing them through, that only when those 5 things are completely and absolutely seen through to the absolute very end, then you start a new list of 25. Yeah. And I feel like as mothers, even when things are going well, whatever that means, because going well on the outside and going well on the inside ain't the same thing in my experience. Mm-hmm. Even when things are going well, we constantly set ourselves up to fail. We constantly put all the things on ourselves or allow other people to put all the things on us. Beat ourselves up for failing in all the ways. I mean, the failure list it's like an eternal loop. It just doesn't, and if you're not failing about something in the moment, something that you have failed about before will inevitably come back. If you are in this habit of, I'm making the eternity symbol, but in this habit of self-aggression in the sense of, identifying everything that you went wrong so that you can do better next time, or so that, you prepare yourself for any comment people might make, or whatever the situation is. But I feel like keeping it simpler, and what I feel from you when I talk to you outside of this conversation is that ability to just make it simpler. Like, you guys downsized your house. You moved to somewhere that you love. You went out on the lake yesterday after a long weekend, and there were almost no boats out there other than you guys and a couple more. Like, you are really, and this is what I put a pin in at the beginning, and it's a nice place to circle back. Mm-hmm. You really are living a life that you love in the middle of a flipping tornado, hurricane.
Yep.
That's like on again, off again, on again, off again, on again, off again, right? Just when you start getting comfortable. Sometimes
there's not a radar there either to tell you.
Right. There's not a lot of, right. There's no early warning signal.
No.
There's no tsunami alarm or anything. So
yeah.
How do you do that? Because all of our lives are going to be rocked at some stage by something, right? So be it, as in our case, a learning difference or a mental health issue. We have had a serious mental health issue in our family in the last few years. Not in our home, but in our very close family that we love very much. Mm-hmm. Whatever it may be, the death of a loved one, loss of a job, I don't know, anything. How do you, in the middle of all of that, consciously craft a life that you love?
I wish I had a magic wand and a magic wand answer for you, because, I don't know, step by step, bit by bit. And that's what I said today to my husband too. It's like, this is paradise and pain. I feel like that's the title of a book sometime, but because it's both. It's let me just look at my notes, because I did take some, really honoring all of it, but being with all of it, being with the experience, being with what is, being with the truth of that, remembering to say, choosing, remembering that you have a choice. Remember when you have a choice. Choosing me, choosing us. Even when it's hard. I think remembering you have choice is big, because otherwise it's so easy to fall into that victim mode and think, well, I can't do anything because this is happening. And start to tease out, like, this is one thread of my life. This is one thread of the big tapestry. And it's so hard to remember that. And really, it was an aha moment for me recently, just to go, okay, you weren't even a mom until you were 29. It means 29 years of your life, none of this was going on. And then into motherhood, there were 15 years that were not this. So it's like 10 years out of 55, but it can feel so big and so all-consuming. So I think taking back that perspective, that this is only one thread, this is only one piece of the puzzle. This does not have to define my whole world. This does not have to rule every decision. Right? There's all these other beautiful threads that are in there, and I don't want to miss them either.
Indeed.
And I think somehow knowing it's okay. That was the place I had to get to. My son was living with my mother-in-law for a while, and she just said, what would you do? I said, I've already done what I would do. And I understand why you're doing all the things that you're doing. You're doing them because you love him, but your love is not supporting him to get better. So redefining that love, redefining motherhood, finding a new way. And staying in the love. I think that's the weirdest part about it all. Because somebody had said, it sounds like you were estranged from your son. And yeah, there have been times for sure when it's like, I just can't be around you right now. And if you're using, I'm definitely not going to be around you. That's a hard no for me. But I will always be part of your life. I will always love you. That's just the truth of it. But choosing to nurture the other relationships and the other things in my life as well. Making time for us as a couple, which we've done all the way through our marriage. And I think that we probably wouldn't be here together if we hadn't done that. Thankfully, I had a mother-in-law and a mother who both supported us. And the mother-in-law particularly was like, you guys need to go away. I will take your kids for a weekend. I will take them for an overnight. I will take them for a week. So as long as she could, she did that. And that just became part of our marriage practice of self-care. But it's not easy. It's not easy. And yet it's possible. There's my possibilitator.
Right.
It really is. It really is. And yeah, it doesn't have to make sense. But if you can hold the hope, and lots of times in the addiction world, we'll say where there's breath, there's hope, talking about our kids. But I say that to the moms, because you're breathing, so you're living now, so there's hope for you. Like, lean into that hope for your life and what it could be. And really, again, not waiting. Like, I'm going to live, my life is for living now, I'm going to live it. And it's not dependent on anything outside of me. It's not dependent on the circumstances of my life. Most of the time. Other than the moments when it is. But the big picture doesn't have to be.
One of the things that you decided, a slight pivot that you took recently, was that you went from coaching people, which is amazing, to stepping what felt very bravely into this strong felt sense of wanting to support other moms who are supporting kids living with addiction or who have lost children to addiction. Mm-hmm. And the message that I've heard you repeat over and over, which I think is a beautiful way to close this conversation, is in your saying that it is okay for you as a mother or as a parent to be happier than your unhappiest child.
Yes.
Which the first time you said that to me was like whoosh into my head. It just, I could feel it through the temples, just from one side to the other, just clearing out a whole bunch of crap that had accumulated in there. Because you do easily get
enmeshed, mired.
Yeah, it feels like the gel of it all, like oozes through the net of whatever, and then all of a sudden it kind of fixes, hardens itself. Yeah. How can you talk just really briefly about what that means for you? That it's possible, okay, and even healthy, critical, life-saving to live
not
to be happier than your most unhappy child.
Yeah. I mean, that phrase came to me because I was at a retreat when I was like 5 years into this as a participant and talking about some of what was going on in my world. And, she just turned to me empathetically and said, oh, well, you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. And I felt this whole body visceral response like, no, that is not going to be my truth. And I want to wipe that belief off the face of the earth. Because I get it, and I think we are conditioned to believe that. And I have seen women sit on retreat feel guilty that they're there because maybe their kid was in the hospital or something was going down at home or whoever, was suffering and struggling. So, yeah, to me it just means, I talk about it in the opening of my book too, about like going down with him would only leave us both drowning. And that wouldn't be good for either one of us. So you have to save yourself and not feel guilty. I am not going to feel guilty when I am happy, when I am meeting up with friends and I am having a good time. I am not going to feel guilty when I am choosing trips and music and all the things that bring joy to me and to my world. Because it doesn't change his reality. It's not like they're unrelated. And for so many years, I would answer the question, how are you doing with, well, this is going on with my child, or this is going on, or, this is, and that's not the question. And so when somebody finally asked me it, they said, how are things? I think that helped me to separate and to see, well, things kind of suck right now, and I'm doing okay. And I think that is the place to get to as often as possible. And when you're not in that other place, when you're not there, it's okay. Let it be okay. There are times when you're absolutely going to go down. I still do. My heart still breaks on a regular basis. But I think the more open-hearted I live in life, the more I am able to choose all of the moments. And that's what the subtitle of my book, The Step into the Full Richness of Life, means. To me, this is the richness of life. It's being able to be with it all, be with it, the unimaginable moments and the unimaginable grief and the ongoing grief, and the ecstatic joy and the bliss. Mm. And I don't even think I'm crazy to be in the midst of all of that. like that's life. Life is happening at us and to us and through us and for us all the time.
I think it's more, use the term crazy, I think it's more unhealthy to pretend that the other side isn't there. I think it's more unhealthy to stuff it down and hide it and dress it up in fancy clothes and pretend that it's something else. The bad stuff in drag is still the bad stuff. Like
absolutely. And it eats away at you the more that you don't talk about it, which is partly why I am so grateful for the chance to have this conversation, because honestly, it's allowing me to, I mean, we've dipped into it somewhat, but I really want to let go of like the horror and the shock and the drama around this story and just own it, normalize it. When I was visiting my son in treatment, we were staying in an Airbnb, and of course, the questions are always, oh, your son is here. Oh, he's 26. Oh, what's he doing? And, for years I would say, well, he's figuring out life or something like that. And I just said, he's here in rehab, actually. He's working on his recovery. And I was willing to risk their uncomfortable moment, because that's what you get. There's this awkward, oh, I didn't know that. But if my child had cancer and I was going to visit him in the hospital in another town, I would tell you that.
Yeah.
And you would give me nothing but an outpouring of love and compassion.
Yeah. And we need to get there for everything
around
mental health.
For people and families who are dealing with addiction and other mental illness, because we don't experience that. I talked to a mom the other day who's a cancer survivor, and she just said the two experiences could not be more different.
Yeah.
There's no meal train. There's no, there's just the, oof, that's contagious. Stay away from me.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I think it's just an uncomfortable moment where people don't know how to respond and can't relate to so much of what we've gone through. Yeah.
And if I get too close, I might get sucked into the hurricane. So I'm just going to stay over here on my stoop, feeling safe. So 2 questions before we wrap up. Okay. One, which I think I always think that I know what someone's going to say. And you have touched on a lot of things that I would suspect might be your answer, but where do you get your Mama Fuel?
I was thinking about that. I'll try to boil it down to like a few, because deep honoring self-care is my answer. And that comes in so many forms. So gratitude is a daily practice and has been for years. And it really does help shift my perspective and shows me that even on the worst of days, there's something I can be grateful for. So that just, doesn't make it okay, but sometimes I'm grateful for my tears. Sometimes I'm grateful for whatever. But that's been a really, really powerful practice. I do Julia Cameron's morning pages, and I've been doing that for 5 years. And I hadn't put it together until I was with her this past weekend for a workshop, and she talked about how powerful they are and how encouraging and supportive they are and how they are a space to work through things. And so I really feel like that has been a critical practice that I just had taken for granted. Somebody else in the group said, the pages can hold what another person can't. Like I can write out anything in there, and it takes me through it, and I find inspiration, and I find hope, and I find new perspectives. So that's been huge. Meditation has been big, and it really has opened my heart. And as my teacher cautioned, that doesn't always mean that it makes things easier, because I actually feel everything a little bit more strongly now. Nature, getting out there, just breathing in the fresh air, being on the water. Yoga always brings me back to myself with all the body, mind, heart, spirit pieces, and so much more. But, choosing us, choosing to live, and finding something fun and something to look forward to every day.
If anyone listening would like to get in touch with you, if there is a mama who is facing the unthinkable and completely terrified as you were 10 years ago, maybe her bum's even shaking, where can she find you? Because you have very generously offered to engage in conversation and support mamas around, in that situation? How can people get in touch with you?
So my website is inspiredpossibility.com. And through there's a contact form, and there's my email, and there's probably my phone number. Please reach out. I don't want anyone to feel that they're walking this journey alone, because there's so many of us. And the more we connect and see that we're not alone, the more we're able to go through it and find humor in it, even at times, honestly.
And thrive.
And thrive. Yes, from survival to thrival.
Yes, thrival. I love it. Barb, it's been such a pleasure talking to you as ever, and I'm grateful for your willingness to share your reality and share what's been alive and real in your family's journey these last 26 years, a little bit, and also for the fact that you have bravely decided to step into this role of facilitator and holder of space for mamas who are supporting their children or have had to take the really tough decisions to create some distance to be of greatest support to themselves and or their kids. Mm-hmm. So thank you from my heart for anyone who may be listening and isn't thinking you out loud. Thank you.
My deep pleasure. And thank you for allowing me the space to have this conversation, because it feels really important and I appreciate it.
It's my absolute pleasure and privilege. I will talk to you soon. Some conversations take a whole lot of courage, and I feel like Barb's willingness to share her experiences and her family's experiences with mental illness and addiction is so important. Particularly, I'm struck by how people whose family members are struggling with mental illness often don't receive the support that they might if their loved one was struggling with cancer. The meal trains don't get kicked into gear. The driving to appointments probably doesn't happen as much because there is a fear of contagion, maybe, a fear of the unknown, a fear of the uncontrollable. And if nothing else from this conversation, I hope that it will encourage you, as it has encouraged me, to turn towards people who are struggling with mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction, and see how we can help the people who love them, because there's probably very little we can do for the people themselves, who hopefully will be receiving lots and lots of great care. I also want to encourage you to join me for an upcoming MamaFuel urban retreat happening across Switzerland in the autumn of 2019, and hopefully, depending on when you're listening to this, happening much further afield into the UK and beyond from 2020. All you need to do is go to mamafuel.me and click on events, and you will be able to find where the next urban retreats for mamas are happening. Hope to see you at one really soon, and I wish you a fantastic week. That's it for this episode of MamaFuel the podcast. Thanks for listening. There's a lot more conversation, sharing, and real mama talk happening in our private Facebook group. To join the virtual village, go to www.mamafuel.me/Facebook. That's MAMAFUEL.me/Facebook. And be sure to say hi when you get there. If you like this episode, or if you know a mama who could use a little mama fuel, and let's face it, we all have times when we're running on fumes, I'd love you to share this episode and to rate it and leave a review. The algorithms work that way. The more reviews there are and the more sharing there is, the more mamas will be able to feel encouraged and supported with the conversations that you just listened to in MamaFuel. Every comment helps, and it's always a super delight to hear from you. Thanks, and bye for now.